In this video, we're going to take a quick look at loops and looping. So say we've been out and about with our field recorder and we've recorded some nice material and we want to bring that into the engine. This is the sound of an industrial fan. That might make quite a nice room tone, especially if we pitch it down a bit, or it could be a piece of machinery in the game. And we want to extract a piece of that to use as a looping sound source. Now I'm going to look for a section of it that is fairly continuous, not anything that has any significant changes in it like this, because that will feel obviously loopy. So I've selected an area here and I'm just toggling repeat so I can hear it looping round. And for doing this kind of editing, you want to turn the snapping off typically, because snapping will be to some sort of musical interval which isn't relevant for what we're doing right now. So let's have a listen to this section here. So typically a loop would be much longer than that, but I'm just making it quite short just so we can kind of hear the problem. And for illustration, if we zoom into it, then we can see what the problem is. That at this start point here, we are not at the zero crossing point. In other words, the waveform is not at zero. So we're jumping from this volume here to this volume down here instantly, which is causing a click. So there's a couple of things we can do. We could zoom right in and we could press Z, and that will jump our playhead to the nearest zero crossing points. You can see on both the left and right channel it's at zero at that point. And what we could do is split it at that point. So I'm pressing S to create a split. So it's starting at a zero crossing. And then we'll do the same thing at the end. Z to jump to the nearest zero crossing, S to split. I'm now going to select just that section, see what it sounds like. Okay, still got a click. We could jump in and actually create some fades. So bring that down at the end. Fade in at the beginning. So that has actually sorted the problem. It's always a good idea when dealing with loops to look away from the screen so that your eyes don't kind of make you think that there's clicks when there isn't. That feels pretty smooth, so I could go ahead and render that out. I'm going to undo it and just pretend that that didn't solve the problem. So here we've got our... Let's just delete that region for the moment. So I'm control, double clicking. So I'm just looping around that section. Now, if we still had a click at this point, a good trick is to do the following. You're going to find somewhere in the middle of the sound file and press Z. That's going to jump to that zero crossing point. I'm going to split it there in the middle of the sound file. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the beginning and move it to the end. And it creates a kind of crossfade at the point at which they overlap. So if we remember, we split it at a zero crossing. And so that means that the beginning of the sound file is at zero. And the end of the sound file is now going to be at zero. So basically our loop point is going to be zero crossing to zero crossing, which should sound fine. So I'm just going to select both of those and glue them together. Select that file, and now we should have a nice seamless loop. And we do indeed. So then we just need to render, and we choose the master mix and the time selection, and we can render that out. Be careful at this point. If you change the sample rate, you will be changing the waveform. So it's entirely possible to have a nice loop in Reaper and then you render it out, perhaps at a different sample rate, and suddenly it's got a click in it. So just make sure that if you do need to change the sample rate, you then bring it back into Reaper just to double check that you haven't created a click. So zero crossings, fade in, fade outs, and if all else fails, cut in the middle of your loop to create a zero crossing at the start and at the end.